In week 2, you ran a detailed fracture on your geometry, and now in week 3, we'll optimize that fracture a bit, set it up for simulation, and run some RBD sims. Now to optimize this, we're going to delete some of the tiny pieces that are super small and that we don't need to include in our RBD sim, and we'll remove some other little pieces we don't need that are just on the interior of the geometry and don't touch the exterior at all. And we'll also cover packing up our geometry so that we can sim it, and optimizing our constraints to remove those that are no longer valid after removing some pieces. And then we'll talk about convex decomposition to generate proxies for our mesh, because we don't want to display and simulate these super detailed pieces all the time. So it's very helpful to work with these proxy representations and simulate these instead. We're also going to build a convex decomposed proxy representation of our creature as well, so that we can use him for collisions in our simulation, because we can't use that animated mesh directly. Then with our fracture and our colliders set up, we can move on to setting up the actual RBD sim. For this initial RBD sim, we'll cover setting up activation of the pieces based on proximity to the creature. And of course, we'll cover setting up a DOPNet and bullet simulation and the various properties that you'll be using to control that sim. And then with that sim setup, we'll discuss efficiently caching out that simulation and using those cached points to reattach either our high-res fractured pieces or our simmed proxy meshes. We'll also take a look at other RBD sim scenarios aside from the situation we have in our class shot, and we'll take a look at setting up different types of initial velocity, such as setting up initial velocity from a reference point, which is a very nice and art-directable technique. And we'll then set up an additional RBD sim with some custom drag. This custom drag will use some geom wrangles, which allow us much deeper control over the behavior of our RBD pieces, and we'll compare that to some of the regular drag options that we have, and we'll talk about how this custom drag enables us to get some effects like this much more explosive initial velocity you see here. And finally, we'll talk about some speed limiting and some other nice art directable controls for your simulations.